Welcome to Worse Than the Borg, the Star Trek podcast for everyone. We unpack new episodes of Star Trek with Star Trek fans, new and old, each week. And each week, we raise funds for causes near and dear to us in the name of solidarity, reconciliation, and justice. I'm Captain Shane, and today I am here with Commander Ron. Hello, Ron. Hello. And Chief Engineer Ravi, of course. Hello, Ravi.
Hello, Shane.
And we are here to talk about this week's fantastic episode of Star Trek Discovery, Season 3, Episode 2. I am so excited today to welcome aboard this week's special guest, Ambassador Jia Qing. Hi, Jia.
Hello.
How are you?
Good to meet you.
It's
I'm
great
good.
to meet you.
Yeah.
This mission log is being recorded on Treaty 13 land, and the participants are committed to reconciliation here on Earth. We believe the United Federation of Planets would fully support the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. All tuned-in Terrans are encouraged to participate in the direct action discussed later in this log.
That is absolutely right, so keep tuned, and we will talk a bit more about that later. My first question right off the bat, Jia Qing, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your relationship with Star Trek? How long have you been watching it? How much of a fan? If you're watching us on Zoom, you'll see that Jia is wearing an amazing shirt.
Oh, slow rise.
Oh, the reveal. Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. When the walls.
September 1991? What's
September 1991. There was another version of the shirt with Picard and the alien, whose name I forget, that they go to the planet together for that episode, dressed up like Simon and Garfunkel. And I gave that to my mother. This one.
I mean, I guess
the character's name is
Danthon.
Danthan.
Danthan? Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
Picard and Danthan at something.
So, judging, I would assume with the Q figurine and the shirt that you are quite familiar with Star Trek.
Yeah, I started watching Star Trek when I remember watching the first episodes when they were on air. So 1989, because I started watching TNG. I was 6, and then it started to be on City TV, which was Channel 7, where I was, and then CBC, which was Channel 6, where I was, between like 5 and 8 every weeknight. So I would just watch episode after episode and rerun after rerun. And then on Sundays, the original series reruns would happen in the afternoon. So I'd watch those.
This sounds very familiar to me.
Yeah, it was very present in my life, and it was one of the few times when my whole family was in the same spot. Was when we were watching Star Trek. So it was definitely a big part of me growing up.
Wow, that's so awesome. That really reminds me of my direct family was not so into Star Trek as I was, but a lot of my cousins were. So that was my first entry point into my larger family, having something to talk about with them. My childhood also was just TNG every day, TOS on the weekends.
See, I want that on a button. TNG every day, TOS on the weekends.
Market for merch.
TNG.
What's it?
In the
TNG.
TOS.
TNG. You took it right out of my word.
I also love the name of this podcast, Worse Than the Borg. It made me laugh a lot.
Do you know the episode it's referencing?
Yeah, when I always forget his name because I find his character kind of whiny.
Well, it's very Canadian. It's Michael Eddington.
Michael Eddington, that's what it is. Yeah, and when he joins the Maquis and gives Cisco that big speech, you're worse than a Borg.
Valjean, Javert, and all that.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I'm sure we'll get to it in a very special episode of this podcast.
Oh my God.
Yeah. We have to. We have to.
Anytime you want to talk about DS9,
So
we'll do that for days.
Shane, I think you mentioned there were
a new best friend today.
Yes.
I think you mentioned there's something like 1,000 unique canon Star Trek TV shows to be made. This is rich content, all of which, I mean, I was thinking the other day, when can we run out of content? Is it when we need to do Shades of Grey, the Star Trek flashback episode. And I'm like, no, that would be the perfect episode to do.
I want to bring on someone who's never seen an episode of Star Trek and show them Shades of Grey.
So wait, it's a
discussion.
It's a plant that bites Riker and then he goes into memory. Explain that a couple times to me. What?
Why doesn't he have a beard? I thought he had a beard.
Yeah, dude, amazing.
Wow. I am really excited to talk about this week's episode. What did everyone think?
I mean, I'm loving it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's everything that we've wanted. And I mean, we'll get into it, but it's really a return to form. They're marrying the modern TV series arc with almost a very more the story this week was very episodic. It all happened, very classic. We got to do it before the sun goes down or we're all going to die. The writers are really hitting their stride with this show. And
I wrote that same note. I said, this is a really well-written episode for the most of it. We'll talk about it.
I feel like it wasn't as cinematic as the first episode. The first episode blew my socks off, but I also know that would be unsustainable. I know that in order to make it through a full season, stories, emotions, everything is you need to have really well-structured stories along the way. And I thought that the season 2, the red signals, I won't give too many spoilers for those but I thought that the way that helped to frame a series of episodes that you could jump along the way was really healthy for a TV series to do. And just constantly going through this frenzied pace will burn out your audience. So I thought this was necessary. I was expecting a little bit more of it's such a difference between the first episode and the second. I was expecting a little bit more of a coming down, and this was directly transitioning into, we've got a thing that we need to fix within 50 minutes. Let's go. So that was a little bit of a jarring thing, but a totally wonderfully written episode for what it needed to be. A couple notes along the way, but it was I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. I thought that in terms of it being cinematic, it sort of fit with the other Discovery seasons where the first episode or the first couple episodes are this movie, right? They're like Star Trek movies. The Discovery series has so much more of the movie feel throughout it, of the Star Trek movies than the little episodes. So I thought it was cool how they sort of brought it back from that. So the combining of the two, and I love the cast. Seeing them work together and getting to come into the characters is so great.
I'm so excited to talk about
this episode. Seemed to bring in humor in a way which is one of my favorite parts about Star Trek is the ridiculous humor that just pops up and sometimes doesn't make any sense. A good rewatch of TNG right now, there's just so many strange moments where you can tell the actors are what are we doing? Let's go with it. And I like to see that sort of creep back in, because I kind of felt some of the newer series are taking themselves really seriously, which I'm there for. Don't get me wrong. But
well, I mean, we can get to it, but it's because Michael Burnham was taking herself so friggin' seriously. Now that has lifted a bit, and I, cannot wait for the thesis on her character development and how it is specifically displayed in her hair.
Oh my God! I'm not
From that very
she
first
let her hair
episode
down.
where she's so tight and cropped, and then those braids in the final reveal of this episode. Okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
We're getting ahead of ourselves. We're gonna have a good episode.
We haven't even talked about Trek news from the week, which I really want to talk about. It's kind of interesting.
Okay, I forgot that I was supposed to mention it, but
no, it's all right.
Sorry, I actually even forget the name of the company. Was it Titmouse?
Yes.
The animation studio,
I'm gonna look it up
which
right now.
does Lower Decks, and Rick and Morty unionized this week. And since we are discussing the United Federation of Planets, thought it might be relevant to bring up. I don't know, Ravi, you want to give us some reaction on that?
I mean, it's happening throughout the industry, right? So much of the gaming and the animation spaces are unionizing. It's one of those industries that really took advantage of people for their dedication to the craft, the interest, the design. You think, well, this is going to be something that young people want to do in droves, and the industry took advantage of a lot of people. There's really horrific stories of the number of hours that are pushed through. Capital has become deeply invested into gaming and the production of gaming, and it's resulted in workers being really, really stretched thin. And I believe that they become animators for all the right reasons. They really love the craft. They really love the art form and the contribution. But that doesn't mean that you don't have basic rights in the workplace. And I don't know enough about the production behind this. I could have done a little more research to find out. I mean, some people unionize in workspaces that are just fine. Some people unionize when it's really, really there's a battle, an undergoing battle. I don't know the background of it, but it's a trend that's happening throughout the industry, and I'm really glad that the Star Trek franchise is seeing this level of activity. I also want to say there's probably a lot of credit we don't give to all of the production and the wardrobe. So where I live in the city of Toronto is walking distance from the USS Discovery, which, by the way, how freaking cool is that?
That's so cool.
It's right there. And I used to work in a job where I talked to a lot of constituents in the neighborhood. Well, that's a giveaway. I used to work at City Hall. And yeah, I refer to people as constituents, by the way. But you talk to people in the neighborhood, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm working on the new movie. I'm a stunt double for so and so or whatever." And you just hear people, or "Oh, I'm doing the Klingons' wardrobe," or They're just so involved, and a lot of those traits are unionized. So it's really that the film and television industry is actually very well represented within the union. They have some really good, well organized representation, but then the animation has typically been left out. So that'll be really increasingly interesting to see as more and more spaces that are animated, like the CGI and the tech. That'll be really interesting, and good for them, good for the workers for unionizing in this context.
And of course, it's really awesome. Step. It's really awesome, of course, that like Star Trek is the one leading the way on this once again. It couldn't be more perfect. I think with that, we kind of have to talk about the episode, but we should probably pause for a quick commercial break. Welcome back to Worse Than the Borg. We are going to talk about Star Trek Discovery Season 3, Episode 2, Far From Home. It was directed by Olatunde Osunsanmi once again, and once again written by Michelle Paradis and Jenny Lumet and Alex Kurtzman. Ravi, would you mind telling us a bit about what happened this episode?
Absolutely. Spoilers coming ahead. So if you have not seen the episode, go and watch the episode and don't listen to this part. But we're going to be dropping spoilers throughout the episode. So just don't sign on if you're not interested in hearing plot points. So the USS Discovery crashes down in an unknown time and space, injuring Kayla Detmer, who's ushered to sickbay because her implant has been damaged. Saru, acting Captain Saru, determines that the best course of action is to fix the extremely damaged ship before exploring the outside world. And meanwhile, Paul Stamets, who's put into a medically induced coma by his partner, Hugh Culbert, at the end of the last season, awakens. Culbert wants Stamets to stay put and get healthy, but Stamets decides to work through his pain. He partners with Jet Reno, the wonderful Tig Notaro, and the two work together to bring back power to the damaged Discovery. Saru and Tilly venture out to find a group of aliens who are oppressed by a man named Zara. When Zara threatens to steal their supplies and kill Tilly, Philippa Georgiou, who follows them, attacks and threatens to kill Zara, much to Saru's dislike. They let Zara go, exchange with the help of the oppressed Caridianites. I'm going to have to try that one a couple times. And return to the ship, which can't take off because of the parasitic ice. The Discovery is pulled out by a tractor beam of Cleveland Booker's ship, which hails them, and they reunite with Burnham, who tells them that she has been in the future for a year and has finally found them. That is the episode in under 45 seconds, I'm sure. What did you all think?
Wow. What an opening. Once again, we start with just pure chaos, and I love it. So much is happening. I took a lot of trivia notes from the website denofgeek.com, and one of the things that they noticed was that it starts off with this blur effect, which is first established in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, the movie from 1979.
Mm.
Anytime a crew travels through a space-time wormhole, this weird blur effect happens, and I love it. It's just another reference to the TOS era, which is literally peppers this entire episode. We will talk about it.
What did you think, Jia Qing?
I mean, I loved it. I'm really excited about Discovery just in general as a series, and I thought that this episode really sort of kept up with the level of excitement that I expect from Discovery, and like the visual effects. I think the camera work is so cool in this series. Love to see the cast.
Like, this is the one we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
Like, this is the Discovery that we wanted from the first poster. You know, we've got this amazing crew. You know, they are together now, and they're just gonna, you know, continue to be amazing. The like situation reports on the bridge were like one of my favorite moments, and finally we're like, you know, we got kind of a moment with all of the crew to introduce them finally after
Yes.
3 seasons. It's taken us 3 seasons to finally see these people like actually in a, you know, more familiar Star Trek way.
Yes, I really can't wait to finally delve into the background of some of these characters whose names we barely know, like Reese and Bryce, Detmer, all of them. I'm so excited to discover more about them.
Well, the Detmer thing was interesting because it seemed to be such a focus, and
Yeah.
there was no
Yeah.
conclusion to that. And that's actually a knock against this episode. Is I'm not sure what is, you know, that the saying of like, you load a gun in the first act so you can use it in the third or something. I wasn't sure what they were building up with some episodes, and I'm not sure if that was really clever because in subsequent episodes it's going to become a thing, or if it's just that they forgot to conclude some of those plot lines. That was a pretty big focus of the first few minutes of the episode. Is she's really, you know, thought it was going to be like she was possessed by an alien or something in mid warp or something.
They did bring it back at the end, but it's definitely been left unresolved. They went back to some close-ups where she's struggling during the liftoff.
Yeah.
And you know, it's, you know, right off the bat you think, oh, she's concussed, like she's
Space
taken a blow to the
concussion,
head.
yeah.
But then she gets sent to sick bay. Oh no.
No?
Jing, are you saying something? Oh, I can tell. Sorry.
Can you now? Am I gone?
You're
You're
No,
here.
here. Okay.
It's like, yeah, no, I totally, with the Detmer thing, I was like, oh, maybe it's Control coming back. Like, Control has followed them time.
Oh.
But I think if we've learned anything from Discovery seasons, the first two, is that they'll tease something and it'll come up a few episodes later, right? Or halfway through the season, we're going to be like, oh, you know, like,
Yeah.
I kept, because they went so far in the future, if we're going to get like teasers about the temporal Cold War, and we got a little bit.
Mhm.
Oh, will Daniels show up, or will something tie in?
Oh my God, Daniels.
Because they're so far in the future. Why the hell not? You know, alternate. A lot of
I
it.
think
Yeah.
the title of this episode kind of hints that we're going to be playing around with time as well, because the first episode of the season was titled That Hope Is You Part 1, and this episode is titled Far From Home. You would think it would be Part 2, but no, I think Part 2 is going to come much later in the season. So we're already playing with time again in this season.
Oh, a flashback episode. There's been an entire year. Why haven't I thought about this sooner? This is incredible.
Yeah.
Of course.
We're
There's
gonna
be
get it in comics, I'm sure, and all
Oh.
No, let's not do that to us.
that stuff. Just to like wrap on Detmer, so you know, after the show we discussed it a lot because we were like, how is she? But she does get sent to the sick bay where she's deemed neurologically healthy, which does not match how she's feeling, and she walks straight past Culber out of sick bay and does not respond to him, which he thinks is weird. So I think it might be more of a PTSD situation going on. I only caught it on the rewatch, but you know, so she's the pilot. She's saved the day. Everybody's really happy, but she goes to sick bay and she notices that somebody has died. Like she says she didn't make it, like, and then she kind of stone walks out of the sick bay. So I think that we'll get a mental health journey from Detmer, although, you know, the poor woman has already been through so much. So maybe she's the O'Brien of Discovery, you know, she's going to get punished over and over and over.
Oh, no, that would be so sad.
Oh no. I think that the and I have to admit the writing was a little heavy-handed with pushing this theme, especially with Paul Stamets's thing. But you know, this idea of working through pain, I think is a really poignant thing we're dealing with right now, is how many people are working through pain, who are working through grief, who are working through mental health issues. And it's definitely a timely message. That message might have started off a little clunky, but I think it's a really good theme to be bringing through this. There's so much import put on, and we could talk about this with Tilly's response in all of throughout this episode, is there's so much import being on like composed and being stoic and like working through pain, and showing heroic characters who are, if they're working through pain, they're facing the consequences of that as well. Like, you don't just get like 4 arrows in your back. I'm thinking of Lord of the Rings, like 4 arrows in your back and you keep slashing away. It's like, no, there are consequences to you, like trying to work through pain when it's not appropriate. And yeah, you're probably going to be on edge where you have a gun pointed at you. Like, seeing those vulnerabilities is actually one of the things that has distinguished Discovery so much more. It might be a plot point here and there for characters throughout the thing, but it's so on display here that characters are affected by the situations around them. And that's really, I invite that conversation a lot. That's a really cool thing to bring to pop culture these days.
Yeah, I totally agree. I love like the kinds of invitations around like masculinity and strength that come in through that. As you know, the way Tig's like, well, my spine hurts, I'm not doing that. You go ahead. Like throughout all of that, those conversations, I think was really exciting.
Yeah, she gave Stamets a kind of like, are you familiar with the theory of the spoons? Like, you only have so many spoons to get through the day. And obviously Stamets is out of spoons. Oh, so
tell me and tell our audience.
Sure. Yeah, I guess that would make sense. I might be getting it wrong, but in a lot of the disability communities, this started from a blog post years ago, where where the writer related her ability to do things to spoons. And so she starts the day with a certain number of spoons, and then if she has to, you know, like for a surprise reason, has to like climb up to a higher shelf to get something, you know, it takes a spoon, and eventually she runs out of spoons, and then she doesn't have any gas left in the tank. And Jet Reno, Tig Notaro's character, is sort of pep talking Stamets through this, and he's being stubborn and doing, you know, he should stop, right? But she recognizes that he's not going to. So even though they're not friends, she's like, you know, being his friend in this moment. And what does she actually say? She's recognizing his pain, saying you are in pain, but you're not your pain. You're not at 100%, but that's okay. You know, you can do what you can do right now. And if you feel like you can go into that Jeffries tube, go into that Jeffries tube. Your partner might kill you later, but you can do it. And to Ravi's point, like, that's kind of what we're all doing in a pandemic situation. You know, we're all facing you know, unique challenges that we weren't experiencing before. So you know, I think they wrote this before the pandemic, but it really is applicable.
Well, I mean, we've seen bits of disability peppered through, like talking about theories around disability and people living with disability throughout Discovery, which was really exciting for me because most of the other Star Treks, like I think there's that episode in Deep Space Nine where they have someone who lives in different gravity, that doctor who uses her own wheelchair kind of thing. Like that wasn't the best discussion about disability. So with Tilly and with, you know, Wilson Cruz's character coming back from the mycelium land and the mental and then Jet's comments, the like, you you're helpless right now, but that doesn't mean you're less capable. Like having kinds of fleshed out discussions with each other, I think is so cool for these, at least for me, because the Star Trek characters in my mind are kind of godlike. They're like, you know, George and Worf can do anything.
Yeah.
Break, you know, Geordi also probably needs some, you know, conversations around healthy relationships, because that whole holodeck thing.
A little cringe.
I think we've talked about it already a little bit, but the vulnerability and that sort of humanity, like we're seeing a different kind of humanity with Discovery, which I really like.
And I think that's important with the tech thing. So speaking of Geordi, sorry, Ronnie. Our internets are working through some challenges here. But
maybe we should be using the like little raise hand. Where's that?
Oh, we should do that.
Have something to add.
We go to the participants badge. This is going to sound really boring to our audience who have probably been doing nothing but using Zoom for the last 8 months.
Yeah.
And for some context here, we're in episode 2, plus we did a pilot episode of Worse Than the Borg. So we're still getting a number of things wrong, and we're fixing them along the way. We're trying to keep it as tight as possible, but, you know, there are things that we're probably going to make it into the final cut.
And hopefully the audience will be as accepting as Jet Reno and Saru are of the weaknesses of the people around them.
Way to turn it around, Ronnie.
I was just gonna tack on to what Jia Qing was saying about just extending it to Saru, taking Tilly out. And I think it's a huge moment for Saru that kind of gets lost in the storytelling about Tilly, where he's helping her manage her fear and showing her that she has value even when, you know, it isn't apparent to her. So I love Mary Wiseman. She killed this episode. It was absolutely stunning. But off screen on the walk, while Tilly is having these self-realizations about herself, we sort of miss, like, Saru spent his whole life being scared until he sort of had the character development in season 2, and here he's not only not scared, but he's helping other people get through it, and that's maybe why he has so much space for her. And then later when they're in the bar, you know, season 1 Saru would have had the gills popping up, and that didn't happen at all. The only part of the only Kelpian thing was the needles.
Oh, the darts!
Right?
Oh my God, that was awesome.
You just whipped it out of nowhere. I mean, like, at the same time, Michelle Yeoh is jumping around the screen being a complete badass.
I could spend the next half an hour talking about how badass Michelle Yeoh is in this episode.
Let's have some.
Like, just the way she tries to take control of the situation, and even though she kind of lets Saru do his captain thing, she's like, well, I mean, I'm just gonna do my own thing anyway, so it doesn't really matter what you say here. The way she shows up, like, right when she's needed, of course. It's a bit of a silly plot device that she's just going to warp into the scene at the last moment, but it's also so fun to just watch her kick ass and like really like use her wits to run around these stupid men and then use her body to run them into the ground.
Well, something that I love about her character is that in another Star Trek, she would just be a bad guy. Like, they would try and stop her.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I was thinking a lot about how at the start of Voyager they set up this, you know, McKee versus Federation thing, but within 3 episodes, we were supposed to have some badasses on the show, and they all end up just being rank and file Starfleet officers, which, you know, is a Star Trek that I like, but at the same time, this Georgiou, you know, she's never gonna be rank and file. And so, like, this conflict is baked into the whole series.
This came up. You go ahead.
Sorry. The raise hand thing doesn't really work on my phone, so.
Right.
But I love how sexually adventurous Georgiou's character is. Like, having really strong.
What an enormous optical range you have.
I know, right? Like,
What you call pain, I call foreplay. Oh,
right?
While she's got the
weeping blood.
tears. Oh my god.
From her eyes, you know.
Yeah.
What? So good.
So good.
Yeah, love having her on her character there. I'm so excited to see what they do with this Section 31 series about her. So
Me too. How are they even going to get her back in? Like, I have so many questions about that. Are they going to bring her back to the 23rd century? Is it going to be a prequel of what happened before she ends up on the Discovery again? So many questions. I don't know how they're ever
Is it
going to
be
answer.
Section 31 in the future? And
Is there a
also,
Section 31 in the future?
I don't know if this makes me like a bad fan of the show, but I thought it was just the bridge crew staying behind. When everybody else started showing up on Discovery, I was like, what?
88 people?
Giorgio is here? I thought that she got left back in the regular time. But I guess I wasn't paying attention. The last like scenes of Discovery season 2 were incredibly chaotic.
There's a lot to
did
keep
not
track
notice,
of.
but
Yeah.
I literally had to go and spend some time at Memory Alpha today to remind me who Control was, who Leland was, who she's wiping off of her shoe in the beginning of the episode.
Hey, let's catch that little moment where Lieutenant Reno is so rude to the lower decks type person who's shoveling Leland into a bucket.
I've already forgotten your name.
Gene, of course.
Gene. And so
To hell with Roddenberry.
That's a like they're making a reference there. Have we forgotten Gene? Have we moved on too far? Is this Gene's vision?
Is this Gene's vision? No, this is certainly not Gene's vision, and all the better for it.
good. Yeah. Love it.
I also just wanted to shout out Tilly. The Tilly delivery was throughout the episode one of my highlights. Like she's easily one of my favorite characters throughout the entire series, but how human and vulnerable she is, but then also is so it's so not that sterilized Star Trek dialogue. There's things I share the Ronald D. Moore take on Voyager, which was too clean and everyone ends up happy with each other. I mean, similar to the Maquis comment is, I kind of wanted Tilly's attitude throughout Voyager. Like, people just like, I've lost my family, I've lost my home, I'm on the other side of the galaxy.
I don't know where I am, I don't know when I am.
And like,
Yeah.
I really
And
wish that like
her vulnerability.
oh, it would have been
Like,
if Ensign Kim was like that, it would have just been so great to be like, what do you mean I'm still an ensign? Like, go, like that would have been so amazing for Voyager to have explored. And unfortunately, it's 20 years too late to have seen that a little bit. But TV also wasn't there. We're in the moment where TV can be a little less formulaic. They know so much more about the audiences that they're trying to get to. So I understand the constraints of Star Trek Past. I don't want to get over that. They were barely not, they escaped being canceled so many times, I'm sure. Just keeping such a tight line on their scripts and doing things probably had a number of constraints. I'm just celebrating that now writers can be a lot more flexible. They can be a lot more risk. They can take a lot more risks. They can speak to more nuanced audiences, which is what we're seeing. I mean, this is not something that they could have done when you're just broadcasting it out to every viewer in the public. People would have been bored. People wouldn't have understood. So they're clearly targeting an audience, a community that they can speak to very clearly. And I think that that's going to be one of the most exciting things, because that's an audience that I feel will grow just because the content is so exciting and fun. That's exactly what you want. So I'm very excited about that.
I loved her my name lacks authority comment.
My name lacks authority. Oh,
We are
so
all
good.
Tilly in that moment.
Loved
Oh,
it.
so good.
Yeah.
Wait, I've had another thought about Gene's vision. So they they kind of slop Gene off as this side character, and I even caught, I think in the credits, he's not even listed as Gene, he's listed as Hazmat. And but this episode is so Gene's vision in a very fundamental way. Like, the original pitch was Wagon Wheel to the Stars, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and we had a very Western episode.
They
Like,
literally
we
walk
had
into a saloon
classical,
halfway through the
a
episode.
saloon. Yeah. And they, they gotta solve the problem by sundown, and they do it in the like very kind of core sci-fi way. Like the parasitic ice is like, that gets the sci-fi nerd in me. I want to know more about that.
Me too.
It's an interesting baddie.
Yeah. In my when the parasitic ice came on, I was like, how does this relate to the crystalline entity? Like, can we like sentient things that like the crystalline entity, those weird tentacle things in Enterprise? Like, I just love those things coming into Star Trek. Things that are alien, not humanoid at all, that have their own mandate.
They had to sell the parasitic ice concept to me because I watched the trailer for Armageddon for reasons that I won't go into, and the whole space dementia comment is just like the man's got space dementia, and so you just take two words and mash them together and hope that the audience buys it, and it's like space dementia, did not buy. Parasitic ice, sure, okay, let's go with it. Let's go with it. But it's right on that thin edge, like that very, very thin.
Speaking of words that make no sense, did anyone catch Zara say the word Vidrash a million times this episode? You Vidrash this, you Vidrash that. I had to look it up because I was just so confused. It turns out that he also mentions the word pigeon, which is making a language, a shorthand language. So Vidrash is actually shorthand for Federation. You're acting like such a Federation captain. You're acting like such a Federation member, like super ideal and hopeful and stupid.
That's a great word.
So, has anybody seen the short treks?
No.
No.
So there is, it's starts to get fleshed out in one called Calypso, and I won't spoil anything for anybody here. Go watch it. It's really interesting, and adds yet another layer of confusion to
an already confusing season.
yeah. So it's Calypso. It's one of the short treks. That's where I'll leave that, and maybe we can catch up on offline later.
Awesome. Adding it to the list. This episode is also just so the original series heavy in references. We talk about EPS conduits and Jeffries tubes. Bryce mentions transtators, which were mentioned in the episode A Piece of the Action as necessary for all tech to work. Tilly mentions rubidium, which is an element needed to make transponders, and that's mentioned in Patterns of Force, the original series episode. The Caridians even, they come from the episode Journey to Babel, which is where Sarek first appears. So someone on the writing staff is really has their nose to the books and is watching everything.
That's so interesting, and I hope that the nerds are happy. The nerds who have like not been giving Discovery its fair shake. Like that, it's a love letter to the original stuff, even though it's full of women and black people this time. Like it's okay.
I also have to say that, and this is, being a Star Trek podcast for everyone, I think that some of this is, we'll make an attempt to make sure that we're not talking past the people who are listening to this podcast about things that, references that people might have. But I think that the same thing is ongoing with Discovery. They want to give that fan service, but I don't think anybody would feel like they couldn't enjoy an episode because they hadn't seen that one episode of the original series or that marginal episode of Voyager. They're not doing that, which is like really, really important for what Star Trek needs to be. I think that part of this is it is a pretty bold and progressive show. But, the audience for Star Trek has been pretty homogeneously white for a long time. And so reaching people who have not enjoyed Star Trek, or at least the masses who have not enjoyed Star Trek, is kind of what Discovery has to do. It has to discover new audiences. And there's a real burden, a real responsibility on the writers to not talk past that space that they're in right now. And kudos to them. They make this a fun, gumptiony, exciting story to watch, even if you don't get the subtle references. That script works even if you don't know that word that he just, which I've already forgotten.
Caridianite.
Caridianite, exactly.
Other thing in this episode, like the Western in space thing comes back, and I know in the book showed up, I was like, I was fantasizing that there would be some kind of like Firefly Discovery crossover where he was actually Shepherd Book, and then he clearly wasn't.
Oh my god, that would have been wild.
Oh my god.
And then the moment that the pigeon comes up, I was like, all right, because it made me think of The Expanse, which is also there's a lot of Toronto connection to The Expanse and the use of the Lang Belta, and seeing Star Trek catch up to other kinds of sci-fi that have been happening since, you know, we had all the Treks of the 90s and the early thousands in the original series. And then also having like a racially diverse cast, discussions about disability and sexuality, like seeing Star Trek be the thing that it was trying to be the example of, or at least what I associate the example of what Star Trek was supposed to be. I'm thinking of I have had about like when you go off about how the original series was so progressive and like first interracial kiss, seeing Discovery seeing Star Trek get brought into the 21st century, really, pretty cool. And seeing the ways that different sci-fi has influenced each other. I'm going to say something that might be really controversial, but did anyone get kind of a weird Jedi vibe about the way that they were talking about the Federation? Like, we've been waiting for you. We thought you were all gone. Like, da-da-da-da-da, you can save us. Like,
not to mention they're wearing robes.
Right?
Oh, I want that black coat. I need that coat. Like, Robbie, at the top of the episode, you were like giving kudos to all of the people working behind the scenes, wardrobe, makeup, hair. You know, like we have never seen such a beautifully produced, like moment for moment Star Trek as this. They're off the hook.
Yeah.
And don't apologize for having hot takes, Yad. This is a podcast.
This is a place for hot
takes. We are paid by the hour to give hot takes, so it's all good. It's all good.
We're getting paid.
Yeah.
We're not getting paid much.
I think, judging, we're gonna stay in touch because I'm gonna want to find out what your reaction to Calypso is, because I think you're, the pedestal that we're putting the Federation on here, it's nice and lofty where Michael Burnham wants it, but where's that going? And what can they actually do in the future without just being colonizers, So I think, to your point, this is the Star Trek that Gene Roddenberry didn't even know he wanted. He was too much of his own time. And we all needed it to come here, and I think that's what we're celebrating.
Yes.
We saw, when you're kind of in the margins and you write yourselves into these shows, we saw this Star Trek in the 90s and in the 2000s because we saw ourselves in it. But they're finally giving it to us like full-throated instead of just kind of half-assed.
It's not a tip of the hat any longer.
Yeah. And the poor straight white men who are getting left behind, I suppose, they didn't make an appearance in episode 1, and we did have one this episode, and he was the villain.
He was a space pirate
and was humiliated, emasculated by Tilly with her reversal of the sweetheart comment. So I'm hopeful that all these men will get on board with the new show, because this is what it was about. This is what it was about.
Agreed. We can't move past this without mentioning the other white character on the show, the main character, Stamets, who also exhibits some pretty toxic masculine traits in this episode, forcing himself to work when he clearly can't. We have covered a lot of ground on this episode, but I think we should take a quick break, and we will be right back with our commitment to reconciliation. Welcome back to Worse Than the Borg. We just talked a ton about the latest episode, but now we are going to come to our segment, which is called Commitment to Reconciliation. What we're going to do here is give a Oh no, I'm gonna have to take this again. Sorry. Give me some water. Okay. Welcome back to Worse Than the Borg. We just spent a ton of time talking about the latest episode of Discovery, and now we've reached our segment entitled Commitment to Reconciliation. Last week, we asked a trivia question, which was, name 5 of the species seen in Discovery Season 3, Episode 1, That Hope Is You. And the winner who emailed us the correct response at worsethantheborg@gmail.com was Alex from Toronto. Thank you so much, Alex. Yeah, woo! We will be making a donation in your name to last week's Direct Action Initiative. Now, this week's question is... Besides this week's episode, list the 4 other times we've seen a Federation starship crash land on a planet.
Yes.
There are only 4 examples, and each more interesting than the last. We may even have an audio clip. Ravi, do we have an audio clip of these episodes?
All hands, brace for impact!
All hands, brace for impact!
Brace for impact!
Get your Kelvin pods.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Captain.
All right. Again, this week's question was, besides this week's episode, list the 4 other times we've seen a Federation starship crash land on a planet. You just heard the clip. Send us your response at worsethantheborg@gmail.com. And Ronnie, would you like to take a moment to tell our Terran listeners about the action we're supporting this week?
Yeah, so the person who correctly answers the question, and if there's more than one wins a little draw, we will be making a donation to Aboriginal Legal Services, which is an organization committed to helping Aboriginal people interface with the Canadian criminal justice system. And that's it.
You can find them you can find them at www.aboriginallegal.ca. Now we've reached the part of our show where we ask our guest ambassador, what the trek? What to you, Jia Qing, as a casual viewer, made no sense, was morally questionable, or otherwise confusing about this episode, or the series, or hell, even the whole franchise?
I don't think Jia Qing is a casual viewer.
Oh, right. Talk about stock writing. What to you as tuned in Terran?
There's a couple of things, but I think the thing I'd love to focus on is this. We talked a bit about Detmer's cybernetic implant, and I mentioned maybe Control came in to the future with really unresolved in this episode. Like, we see them revisit Detmer's sort of potential PTSD or something, concussion happening when she was taking off. But also in the opening credits, I noticed that there are all these star robots, right? There's these little robots. Wally.
Yeah.
It was totally Wally.
Totally Wally, right? But then I was like, wait, there was the massacre at the Utopia Planatia shipyards when all the synthetics killed all the workers, which we learned about in Picard.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly post that. So where's the Federation and their relationship with synthetics? How is Detmer's cybernetic implants going to play out? Because now she's moved from a pre-Utopia Planatia massacre universe to a post-Utopia Planatia massacre. And for folks who haven't seen that, Picard, the Federation sort of outlaws any kind of research into synthetic organisms. So folks like Data or Lore, any of that stuff, any kind of androids. So I'm really curious to see what that's about, because seeing those in the credits, I was like, wait, WTF? I thought those would be done now. Yeah, so that's my what the trek moment.
Yeah, I mean, that brings up some really interesting possibilities about this future. Are synthetics still outlawed? At the end of Picard season 1, I feel like we reached a point where the Federation actually came in to protect synthetic life, although they were kind of just responding to a galactic crisis as well. So will the Federation reverse its decision that was made pre-Picard? I hope so. I otherwise Detmer's in a lot of trouble.
Right?
That's a
It's
really
a
solid
weather
what the
check for
track.
me too. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
that's a
what the
good
track
one.
does, like.
Well, I guess have we missed anything? Ravi, Ron, have we missed anything from the episode that we didn't talk about that you want to sneak in right here?
I do want to sneak in. I have been quite critical of the Culber Stamets as good queer representation, and you know they buried their gays in season 1 quite violently and awfully after teasing us that it was going to be good representation, and then they spent season 2 trying to repair that. But like, I just don't buy how much Culber is now in love with Stamets again after how cold they were. Like, did we get there last season? What did you think? Or are they just like kind of retconning it and now they're so in love? Like, where was that?
I kind of am with you, Ronnie. I thought it was a little bit forced this week.
I can see it going both ways. I mean, I think the excitement of the end of season 2, they kind of built a little bit of that in, trying to it could have been a slower burn, and I think they kind of rushed through a lot of those
like
relations.
30 seconds since they came through the other side.
No, that's a good point, and that's the part we have to continuously remember, right? Is that we have to gauge ourselves. I guess I've been thinking through Michael Burnham's hair time span, and this is actually like a much narrower time. Just like a day or two. Yeah, that's a good take. Yeah.
It's like, oh, you almost died, so everything's okay now, and I love you, which doesn't because he was so like fraught with his feelings for Stamets, you know. I'm right with you. As soon as he said like died and then kissed him, I was like, wait, whoa.
Yeah.
I want to make note of Saru's captaincy now, because part of the question is the first two seasons, Saru goes from this, I've been living a life of fear, and now I'm not fearful. And part of me was like, okay, that's a great moment to kill off a character. But they didn't. But the question then is, where do you take the character, and how? And this is Doug Jones deserves some credit for just delivering this performance so well, because
I also
so
watched
much
Hocus Pocus last night, where he plays Billy the Butcher
for reasons we won't get into in this episode.
What an actor! Oh, unbelievable. Sorry, Robbie.
No, but he delivers his performance in that there's nothing specific about the script that's that over the top, you know, this sort of proud, seasoned captain, but he just steps into that role so fluidly this episode, just like they don't write a plot point. He just starts behaving like a mature, seasoned captain, like father figure type thing, and you're just like, what's going on there? It was so incredibly written that way and so incredibly delivered that it really is worthy of note. That I think there's a lot more that his character can do in the coming. So they're building in this new arc, and part of it is that guy's not going to be interim acting whatever captain for long. And I think that's part of what they're doing. Is I thought they were just playing the scenes and the scripts along so that Michael would eventually become the captain of Discovery. And I don't think that's what they're doing. And I think they're trying to make it so that Saru grows into that role in a way that really captures the audience. I think they're doing that wonderfully. I'm super excited to see that. Get that acting out of here. Get that interim act out there. He's doing a great job.
Amen.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I have so many notes from this episode.
Come on, Shane. I want to hear them.
I mean,
we're going long.
When Saru said first contact, my mind immediately filled in, and you folks are on some kind of Star Trek. I really, oh gosh, I love when she's talking to Linus, the hilariously named alien crew member, about the visual spectrum, and her line about pain, which we talked about. Tig Notaro and her acting were fantastic.
Give me that lesbian with back pain representation.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
We all know her.
Yeah, I really loved the writing of this episode. It was funny and it felt natural. That was one thing that did not feel forced on me this episode.
Can I also?
And I gotta say, like, despite my criticism of the way that Colburn Stamets had been written, like, what a joy it is to watch Wilson Cruz act. He is so charming.
Yes.
You know, he's. If I just didn't feel off about the whole thing, I would have absolutely loved it. And another side note is all of the blood on the costumes.
That white uniform.
The medical uniform. We don't see a lot of, you know, Star Trek is so clean, right? The blood and guts of it all. We don't really see a lot of it in the previous iterations, and this is definitely a more realistic, I guess, representation of how, you know, human and messy we are when we get cut.
Down to the camera work, like in that bar scene when they're in the saloon, like you can tell that someone's holding the camera. There's like little jitters and like movements that give you the feeling of being there. And something I noticed from the first seconds of the first episode of Discovery was that when they do things in space, everything's not on the same plane. Things are on different planes because they're in freaking space. They really play into giving you that feeling of zero gravity, the feeling of being there, that grittiness that you're talking about. Like, I love that incorporation because it puts you in there, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the two ships meeting, like this in space, it doesn't make sense. But yeah. Discovery is giving us a bit more of a, you know, an accurate way to that you would actually just fly in on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Shane. We've hijacked your.
No, don't apologize. This is so amazing. This is everything I've ever wanted in my life. I was just looking over my notes one last time. The line, Tig's line. I don't know. I'm on drugs. I really felt that.
Bobcat. I think she called him Bobcat.
Yeah.
Can we get a show of hands? Who thinks that was improvised?
Yeah.
I listened to a rival podcast, and Tig, first of all, does not know her lines half of the time apparently, and they all love her on set.
Yeah, I caught EPS relays. Yeah. Her techno babble was not on point, I do have to say.
But I support her journey on this show 100%.
Yeah.
She will apparently never be a full-time cast member because she doesn't want it, which is, you know what? Give me these wonderful moments here and there. Let her show up and be like this pixie that flits in and out of the Discovery universe.
Yeah, and fucks with
Cerbic pixie.
And messes with Stan.
We're already checking off the explicit category on the box. Like we had a couple swear words in the last one, so we're gonna have to. It's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, and we didn't talk about Burnham's hair, even though we teased it teased it, pun intended, at the beginning of the episode. But like that was such a fun reveal because I don't know, I had a feeling it was going to be Burnham. I think we all did, who rescues the Discovery in the end. But when she shows up on screen, and wow, it has been a year, and has she let her hair down? It looks amazing.
When the mood matches the weather of a scene, it's called a pathetic fallacy. We need the literary term equivalent of this. Jia Qing, you're a writer. We need to develop a word that means that people's hair represents the mood of a scene or a storytelling element.
Pathetic follicle. Pathetic follicle.
Pathetic follicle. Perfect.
Name of the app.
I swear to God, there's somebody is out there writing their doctoral thesis on her character development and hairdressing. Like and I'm gonna read it when it comes out.
I mean, there's so many rich conversations to be had about the decentering of whiteness in the future that Discovery is really bringing us, and you know, moving from watching Discovery and another amazing show filmed in Toronto called Dark Matter, moving from watching those kinds of shows where the casts are far more representative of what humans actually look like, makes going back to older sci-fi so jarring for me. Like, oh, right, fuck. Like, in my great places of diversity, blah, 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 because that's how I viewed them when I was watching them initially. But, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think it's really cool. 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 I think it's really cool Discovery and other sci-fi series really just pull ourselves, I'm saying it again, pull ourselves into the 21st century and like actually great. Because growing up having Spock and Worf as like examples of being mixed or like growing up outside of your culture, it's like kind of not me, and that's probably coming to my mind and how I envision myself as more Vulcan than Chinese. So, you know, like I love what I'm seeing.
Oh,
Absolutely.
folks, this has been
And
such
we'll have
an
to do an
incredible
episode.
conversation. Yeah, Ronnie. Well, we are definitely going to have to do a theme episode.
Like, let's
Did I-
talk about the Afrofuturism of it all. Like, it's, you know, Star Trek has never served Afrofuturism really at all. You know, the closest we ever really got was Geordie Maybe. But, you know, I'll just leave it there because we're at the end of the episode. But it's amazing that finally this franchise is connecting into all different types of. Oh wait, I am misspeaking. I gotta give Avery Brooks some credit for doing this on Deep Space Nine. Definitely got some discussion there. But I'm glad it's back.
So this is going to be a reoccurring theme, and I want to actually link back to our first episode where we make note of something that actually has been done in the past, but either didn't note it, that we didn't make note of it, or for some reason there was a misconnection. And so in the last episode, I talked about our character in the first episode who represents South Asian culture with the full-on accent, and already within that episode, we drew back to South Asian actress in Discovery season 2, and it was revealed to me, I noticed the South Asian-ness of this character more than other characters in the past. And my dad, I was talking about this podcast with my dad, and he goes, oh, well, it was actually done in Star Trek The Motion Picture. That was the first time I saw South Asians represented in mainstream culture. And it's Persis Kambata, who's the actress. She's an Indian beauty queen who is cast in Star Trek The Motion Picture.
Of course.
And he was like, yeah, that was the first time Star Trek to choose to do it. And so I was confronting myself. I mean, I kind of erased a whole bunch of prominent South Asians in saying so. I think it's valid to talk about the Indian accent being a feature of main characters. So this is going to be a trend. We're going to notice things that actually were done before. And I asked my dad, what did he think when he saw it back in the day? What did he think of seeing a South Asian character? And his comment was, well, it wasn't that big of a difference. She wasn't really portrayed as South Asian. And I think that's part of it, is that there's things that are there where it's very progressive for them to feature cast members. But if you don't put the entirety of that identity on display, it can be a little stifling, a little bit limiting. So I want to recognize that we're all going to do this throughout this podcast, is note really interesting things. And it's going to feel like we're erasing really great moves that were made in the past, but in some ways it's like, no, we can make up for that a little bit, but let's have the conversation as well as, no, these things have to be on display in full form to have the same emotional impact. For some, those were really big steps. I don't want to erase that at all, but you know, there's something to be said about a South Asian accent being actually portrayed that was really powerful in the last episode. So I want to give shout out to my dad for calling me on that. And Shane, I think you called me on it before in the last episode. And I think it's a really important theme we should talk about going forward, is where have things actually been portrayed, but it didn't sink in, or it's being featured in a new and exciting way in Discovery or in the other current Star Trek.
I mean,
So I just wanted
this
to
is part
leave
of
you
our
with that.
This is part of our commitment to reconciliation, is reconciling this stuff within ourselves too. Jia
Totally.
Qing, you wanted to say something as well.
Yeah, on that note, we were talking about, I think, Ronnie, you had mentioned in the short trek, they talk about the Federation not being sort of the greatest thing, or we're talking about Federation being different. Like Deep Space Nine, which is my personal favorite trek, their discussions around the Federation as like colonizers, or the ways that they show up to like knowing better about how to help the Majorans, like I loved seeing that unfold. And I think it'll be interesting to see how we start having discussions about what the Federation actually is, and you know, ways that mirroring the UN are maybe not the best for everybody, plays out in, what are we now, 3188? Is that right?
3189 maybe.
3189, right? Because it's been a year. Yeah.
Oh, right.
I mean, and that's worse than the Borg, right? Like we want to explore how this material that we get so much value from, that we thrive on the diversity of. And I did notice for the first time in the opening sequence on the Vulcan salute, they have the infinite diversity and infinite combination symbol right there on the front screen at the opening. But yeah, I think that the coalition of the willing aspect of this of Star Trek has kind of been its saving grace, but how does that always get applied? It hasn't been good and messy, and that's where the Maquis come from. And just like back to Ravi's point, like us here in the future, like I am so excited by what is happening on screen, this like overflowing of positive representation and great storytelling. And it's hard not to get swept away in it. And like some of the Avery Brooks specific like episodes, the name of the episode's escaping me, but where they are back on Earth and they're writing sci-fi, that as a standalone piece of art is just like an incredible thing. And the fact that he was able to make that at that time in a show that it wasn't really the focus of the show, it really speaks to the work that people have been doing long before this.
Yeah. Well, and even in the one episode of Deep Space Nine where him and Jake build the pre-warp Bajoran ship to prove that the Bajorans could have made the trip to Cardassia. Like, I love that episode because I remember like around that time discussions were happening around whether or not people could have sailed from the African continent to South America and whether or not that was possible. We were saying, oh, there's no way. And for them to bring that in and have that conversation again, like in Star Trek, I'm going way down a rabbit hole. You got to stop.
You got to come back as a guest. Got to come back. We have you back.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been an incredible conversation, and it's gone on so much longer than I expected, and I couldn't be happier. But I think at this point, for our listeners, we should wrap this thing up. I want to thank once again Jia Qing for being here. Jia Qing, great job. How can people find you?
So I'm a writer and I've made music in the past. You can find, probably the easiest place to find my work is through Metonymy, which is the publisher of my novel. And they are Metonymy. I'm going to have to give you the address.
We'll link it in the show notes.
Put it in the description.
Get it in the bio.
And my music can be found at Bandcamp. The link's in the bio.
We are at Shane Came Back, at Ravi Yi Joshi, and at Ron Sly. And you can follow all of us on Twitter at Worse Than Borg and on Instagram at Worse Than the Borg. Plus, you can email us at worsethantheborg@gmail.com. And please remember to subscribe, tell your friends, and if you like us, rate us 5 stars. Thank you once again for listening. You have been assimilated. Have a great day.